Welcome to the Business Blast podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Wagner. This episode is brought to you by Authors Unite. Authors Unite makes the process of becoming a published, best-selling author as simple as sipping your morning cup of coffee. You can learn more about Authors Unite at authorsunite.com. Now, let's jump into the episode. All right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Business Blast podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Wagner. Today I have Mike Sedam with us. He is a professional speaker, consultant, and hosts the Crucial Talks podcast. His goal is to help people understand what drives them and others. So welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, Tyler. Glad to be here. It's pretty cool to be on the other end.
Yes, I know, isn't it? I always like when I get interviewed as well, too. It's so fun, man. So we'll jump into the Sedam, and we will start with the first question. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's hit it.
The first one I have for you is, what is the best story from your life that has an underlying valuable message?
This is kind of an interesting one because I didn't realize it had an underlying valuable message till just recently. So this is about 25 years ago, and it really became a lesson in how people can transform themselves by signing new roles and adopting new identities. So during my first few weeks, I was a new cadet at a military academy. I was homesick, 17 years old, just left home, and I felt inept compared to a lot of my classmates and what I saw them doing. So I wasn't able to see anything when I closed my eyes except for like visions of home and what I could be doing since it was the middle of summer, all this stuff. And if I figured out a lot later, 25 years later, that my brain was stuck in an old identity. And that identity was causing some serious stress and anxiety. And it was like hurting my performance at the academy. And every day because of that felt like an eternity. I was barely getting to know my classmates. I couldn't do things right. And I don't remember when it was. I don't remember the specific day or time. But I recall hearing a story of one of the service's past heroes or something like that. And then all of a sudden, I started imagining myself in a new role. And I started identifying with this role and assigning these behaviors that I knew went with this new role. And it became this bigger goal that kind of transcended what I was going through at the time. So my entire outlook changed. I began to focus on where I was. I was more engaged in the moment. And even during the worst experiences, I was able to tell myself, hey, if I just make it to the next meal by focusing on what I needed to do right now, I could make it through. And so I was able to do this because I had this, all of a sudden, this bigger goal that I shared with fellow classmates. And in that moment, because my role changed, my identity changed, it had this tremendous impact on my mental state, impacting my motivation, my well-being, all of that stuff. And I'm still friends with those same people 25 years later that I shared these goals with. So it became this lesson on the power of having this shared goal, this bigger goal that people can have, and having a shared identity with other people that are kind of going through the same thing you are.
And what is the most valuable piece of information we should know that's within your expertise or industry?
Well, if you were to ask my 7-year-old son this question, he would know right off the bat because he's heard me say it enough on my podcast. So when I ask him, I'll come up to him and I'll say, hey, Ryder, what are people? And he'll say, social storytelling animals, because I use that catchphrase all the time in my podcast and my speaking. And I use it because that's where I think everything that we do now as people has grown from and why we're so powerful and successful as a species, because there's a bunch of social animals out there, right? Dolphins, bees, apes, they're all out there, but there's only one social animal on the planet that can construct reality with each other. And that's us, that's people.
And what is your best piece of overall business advice, so not necessarily industry specific?
Best piece of business advice, I would say focus on the social motivators that impact how people behave. Because if you have trust in your organization or on your team, people will be able to communicate better. They'll be more motivated. They'll be more creative. And they'll also have a bunch more energy to put into whatever the group is working toward because they won't have to divert energy to protect themselves from getting stabbed in the back. So I would say focus on those social motivators above all else.
And if you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would that be?
I would say start learning about people earlier. I think that's the key. For a long time, I believe some new ideas, some new technology is the answer to a lot of the problems we have in the world. But the reality is, and what I've been finding out, is the answer to a lot of questions we have that's been around since we hunted and gathered in tribes. It's us as people and being able to join together to work toward common goals. So I'd say, hey, if I could have started learning about people a lot earlier, I'd probably be a lot more successful than I am.
And in your opinion, what's the key to happiness?
Now I feel like I sound like a broken record. It has to be social belonging. I mean, I watch people do stuff like CrossFit or there's Spartan races, or ones with mud pits and stuff like that. I say watch because I don't do them on my own, but I watch them. And you can also look at military units, great sports teams, and happy work environments, and you'll also see it because with that strong social belonging, with that esprit de corps, with strong in-group relationships, people get esteem from that. They get good feelings from that, and that really, I think, is the key to happiness. I've seen lonely people with a ton of money miserable, and I've seen poor people with strong social bonds that are some of the happiest people I've ever met.
And what is the best book that you've read, and what was the number one thing you learned from that?
Okay, so I read a lot, probably like you. So I'm going to go with what I've read currently. Read really 3 books, and it came up to kind of like a neck and neck. I read this book called Sapiens, another one called Social, that kind of deal with human beings as social animals. But this latest book I've read is called Conversations Worth Having. And I interviewed one of the authors. I'm going to interview the other one probably here within another week or two by Jackie Stavros and Sherry Torres. And the reason I love the book is because it's based on appreciative inquiry, but it's based on communication and how to have positive conversations to positively impact what people do and how people behave.
And what is your favorite quote and why?
Again, this came down to a bunch. So I love this one. It's by me, and it's if we want to understand behavior, we need to understand what drives people. It's kind of like my catchphrase. But then I thought, well, that's too self-serving. So how about Aristotle? And there's actually 2 by him. One, he said, man is by nature a social animal. An individual who is unsocial naturally and not accidentally is either beneath our notice or more than human. Society is something that precedes the individual, and that just goes back to that social belonging. But my favorite one from Aristotle is this. Educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. And to me, your educational path is way different than mine. How I got here is different than yours. And to me, it doesn't matter what you get on a piece of paper. It matters what's in your heart, and that education doesn't have to come from some brick and mortar school. It can come from a mentor. It can come from the street. It can come from trial and error. But if you have it in your heart and you educate what matters to your heart, you're going to be able to do some great things in this world.
Dude, thank you so much for coming on. The last one I have for you before we let you go is, where's the best place for people to find you online?
Probably my website, www.crucialtalks.com. They'll find links there to the Crucial Talks podcast, to my LinkedIn profile, email, phone number, all that stuff. I love to connect with people just like you do. So the more I can connect, the better off we all are.
Perfect, man. And I agree. Thanks again for jumping on.
All right, brother. Thank you.
The podcast you just heard was published with Anchor. Got something you want to say to the creator of this show? Send them a voice message using the Anchor app, free for iOS and Android.